The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style.
Hello and welcome to the Big H Podcast. My name is Mike Hayes and my guest today is Hilton resident, writer, farm owner, mom, former, whatever you call it, is Ruth Herne Logan. And Ruth, you're known as Ruthie in our house. It's great to have you.
It's good to be here, Mike. You kind of butchered the name, so I'm just going to go right to that.
Can you say the name?
Yes. So my writing name is Ruth Logan Herne.
Well, I apologize for that.
No, that's hysterical. That's hysterical. But my legal name, of course, because I'm married to my high school sweetheart, Dave Blodgett, is Ruth Blodgett. And that's what most people in town know me as. But that alter ego, the writer, slips herself in there all she can.
No, and I'm glad you during the course of this podcast, you correct me as you should. And I tried to do some.
We try to do that. This is just what we do.
Girl power. Yeah. I tried to, research through my wife this morning and, get names and people and siblings and kids. She's like, am I on the podcast right now and everything? And she, yes, I'm very good. Kids. So it's Ruth
Logan Herne. That's my author name.
But you're married to Dave Blodgett, who we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you all the dirt.
All right. That's what we want. Okay. Well, like when I start my podcast, I like to find out a lot about the guest. And I think once we learn about the guest, we learn more about what they're all about and what's their contributions to Hilton and beyond.
I've watched a few of the podcasts and I like that. I like seeing the people behind the person kind of thing, or the person behind the people. Mm-hmm. Either way.
Okay. Well, with that said, tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you're from, your parents, your grandparents, siblings, etc.
This is interesting. And it is definitely an overcomer story. So I know that a lot of the folks that watch a podcast or listen to podcasts understand that overcomer stories can be difficult, but they can also be very inspirational. So I was born the seventh of 9 kids to Bud and Mary Herne in the 10th Ward. My mother and father both had severe drinking problems. But that didn't occur until after I was born. So I may have been the curse. You don't know. We don't know. Mm-hmm. But a series of events occurred at that time that I think tipped my mother over the edge. We're pretty sure now she was bipolar. It runs in my mother's family. And while I know mental illness is never a fun thing to talk about, I think especially in today's age when we know so much more about it, that it's important to talk about. It's important to get it out there. So mom kind of fell apart by the time I was age 5. And we went through the suicide attempts, the massive depressions, my dad's drinking. So it was, you're going to say that's a rough go. And it was, but I was surrounded by people at Sacred Heart School. So I was a Catholic school brat, admittedly, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So those people were my strength. They were the ones that lifted me up, encouraged me, praised me. And I also had an aunt who had married but widowed, and a grandmother who did the same things. They lived on Ridgeway Avenue, so close enough when things got horrible at home, when the police were called, or when there were interventions. Aunt Isabel would come over and pick up my brother, my sister Jenny, my brother Terry, myself, and my two little brothers, and bring them over to her house until things calmed down. And God bless her. That kept us out of the foster care system. It kept us out of being a totally split and divided family. So that was the blessing of having people that care around you. So while that all sounds dark, it was such a learning experience of how if people come from outside and care, you can make an incredible difference in a kid's life. You don't have to be that parent or a sibling or even necessarily a close neighbor. Sometimes the people that are that little bit distant, whether it's a teacher or a coach, and I have to say teachers and coaches, I love them, and librarians, because they were there for me all the while. So that was the early stuff. And we may get into that a little bit as we go on, but at age 15, one of those weird junctures, my sister Pat, who lived here in Hilton, asked to have me come live with her. And they were furious. It was a really rough time. But in the end, they signed the papers so that I could go to Hilton schools, graduated there in 72, met my high school sweetheart, Dave, there. And that changed a lot of things because I had a clean house. I had clean clothes. It was weird being the new kid in class and being in a public school. So that was very different. But that was a big turning point, an opportunity. And I am a big fan of taking every opportunity that comes my way. I think grabbing hold of those opportunities, working with them is huge. Don't avoid them. Grab them. See where they take you. If they don't work, you try again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the early Ruthie.
Well, with the early Ruthie, you mentioned you're from a family of 9 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Discuss a little bit about your siblings, their influence on you, because I'm a believer that family is the unit of structure.
Absolutely.
Where their paths took you, and obviously your one sister who took you in, you said at
Yes.
15.
Yeah.
Tremendous influence, gave you an opportunity.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your siblings.
Yeah. So we've had 2 of them go home to God. The oldest sister, Pat, who took me in, passed away a couple of years ago. And a few years before that, my oldest brother, Mike, passed away. It's one of those things where we had a family where there was a big gap. There's 21 years between my oldest sister and my youngest brother. And that 21 years was kind of like 2 families.
Mm-hmm.
So the older families, they were gone. By the time I really had conscious memory at like age 5 or 6, they were grown up. And, but I had a sister, Sweetgrass, who was very busy in civil rights.
Wait, the name is Sweetgrass?
Yes. Her name as a child was Mary Ellen Herne. And she just, as she got into, okay, can I say hippie? Sweetgrass
Sure.
is a hippie, and
Yeah.
she is an avowed hippie, and that's fine. That's wonderful. She has the biggest heart. And so Sweetgrass was off doing all the amazing things that you did in the 60s when you were a hippie. And but I had my sister Jenny, who loved me, and my brother Terry, who were both very strong advocates of trying to keep us safe and together. And that was very important at that time. My sister Ronnie, God bless her, she has just come back to this area after 50 some years away. She served as a captain in the Air Force in Vietnam,
Ooh.
doing missions. And she was a nurse, an Air Force nurse, and an amazing person. So I had a lot of good examples, people that stretched and moved up and out. And that's a help. That's a help. It was tricky once I moved to Hilton, though, because there was a separation. They weren't necessarily driving at that time or had a car. You know, we're talking the late 60s, early 70s, and people just getting started. But they were a big influence on me and on my outlooks on life and how to reach out and help others.
Because nowadays, I think what the average American family is 2.2 kids,
Yeah.
whatever that. I'd like to see that 0.2 person. Talk
Odd.
about the
Odd looking.
yeah. um, talk about the positives from a big family standpoint. 9 is big. I came from
Yes.
5,
Yeah.
and people were like, "Oh, your mother," but 9,
Yeah.
and like you can make it work
You know,
despite.
yeah, I have to say that the positives came about later, most likely. I mean, I think back and there were lots of positive things. But I would say that now the positives are having that big family, being connected for the most part through proximity, or the ones that aren't around here through letters, emails, phone. I mean, think back when I was young. First, we had a party line, and you had to wait your turn to use a phone to make a simple phone call, and you couldn't be on there long. And long distance, nobody could afford long distance. You were charged by the minute, and it was insane. So nobody could afford that. So technology has brought families the opportunity to be together even when they're not together. So that's been huge. We still carry on some traditions that my mother started back when, oh gosh, when I was 12 or 13. One of them is very poignant for us, and we do it every year. We have a family Christmas party. We host it at the farm now. And she would always read the second chapter of Luke, the Christmas story, the Nativity, the birth of Jesus. And we've kept up that tradition, and we explain to all the children, the grandchildren, and now those that have great grandchildren, what this is all about with my mother's picture. And they don't need to know all her troubles. That can come later when they need to understand that there's a genetic problem in the family, but it doesn't need to come when they're young. So we do that reading. They have an idea of who their grandmother or great grandmother was. It's beautiful. Half the room cries, and that's mostly the girls. And it has brought us together because we've kept that going for, gosh, over 50 years. And that's a wonderful thing. So that tradition is there. Also, because we've all had kids and we all love sports, and you can appreciate that. Our kids have grown up playing sports together, or playing sports competitively, apart on opposite teams. And we've seen all the goods that sports, faith, home, love can do for kids. So that's kept us as a unit.
Wow, that's great. Not just girls can cry. You made me tear up a little bit about that Luke talk, but that's wonderful. You kind of, I'm not gonna say you glossed over, but I'd like to go back a little bit about your early education at the Catholic thing. So like that before you got into the public school system, what was it like being Catholically educated? I don't know if I said it right.
Yeah, that's fine. So I can only talk about my experience because I know it varies. I hear people and their funny stories or horror stories or whatever about the sisters. I am a good friend still with a lot of the Sisters of St. Joseph. I support them monthly, intentionally, financially. And I go to some of their events because those women helped shape my life. Those women gave back to a community in a time when it would have been very easy not to. And I always looked back historically at what the Catholic Church brought to America. And primarily, and don't get Father Cantonese, Father Joe, don't get mad at me, or you either, Father Steve. But it was those women building hospitals, those women building missions, those women building schools, incorporating everything. They were amazing. So I look back at that historically, and that was my experience at Sacred Heart, is that those nuns, sisters, and the lay teachers were wonderful. They were wonderful. They weren't perfect. I don't expect perfect.
Nobody was. There's only one person.
Exactly. I'll give that honor to Jesus, and that works for me. But I also found the level of just strict education was amazing. The level of what they presented to us via textbooks, via learning, via lectures, via hands-on projects was amazing. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm smart. This may make a difference. I don't think they had the staff or the abilities, if you had somebody with severe learning difficulties, to be able to do that well. But I think if you had average to above average intelligence, you soared.
Mm-hmm.
And you soared because they expected you to soar.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted you to soar. They wanted your success. So
Mhm.
that was my experience. And I went right through to Nazareth. God bless my sister, Ginny. I've got to get this in here.
Mhm.
Ginny was working, still living at home, working at Kodak at that time. Ginny is 7 years older than I am. I was a freshman at Nazareth, and my parents demanded that she pay rent. Now, I'm just going to say this was not a place that you would think you would want to pay rent for.
Mhm.
But Jenny said, okay, I will pay you that money each week to live here. And they said, well, we need it for Ruth's education, for Ruth's tuition. And she said, okay, I will do that. But Jenny did not give them the money. Every month she took that money down Lake Avenue to Nazareth Academy and paid it in the office so that, oh, see, now I'm tearing up, so that my tuition was paid and I didn't have to think about it. So those sacrifices, you never forget.
No, you don't. And, my mother had 5 kids and she says, we're going to help with the first 4. And we were just hoping that by the
Yeah.
5th one of you guys could come through and,
I
help
hear
out
ya.
with the 5th. Now, when your experience, I think with the structure and the expectation of your Catholic schooling, I think that should be demanded of anywhere. And I think you could take any type of kid.
See,
And
are we
if you
going to get
do
in
that-
trouble if I agree and say that I would love to see voucher programs and schools of choice all over so that people can choose
Mhm.
and have that hope in all these cities of that kind of education? And this is not dissing teachers, because most of the teachers that know me love me and I love them. But that idea that competition breeds success.
Mhm.
And if you have to compete for the kids, you're going to up your game.
Mhm.
I mean, we all do. You know,
Mhm.
you're a coach.
Mhm.
I coached soccer for a lot of years. If you're going to meet some tough competition, you up your game.
Mhm.
You're more careful about who you're putting in at
Mhm.
this position or that position because you know it matters.
Mhm.
So I think that's just common sense.
No, and you're never going to get in trouble saying anything on my podcast. I'm a public educator, but I think, the voucher system, if there's any type of institutionalism, it could be revolved around
Yeah.
the educational system where
Yes.
kids are stuck in a certain area because of their address. And, Hilton's starting to get a
Yeah.
little bit better with urban, suburban, and, that type of thing. And gives kids an opportunity that they probably
Well, because
wouldn't
I'm a
have
living example.
had.
I am a living example of what that strong education did
Mhm.
for a kid that was, from a really rough circumstance. And so I think that's indicative of what can be accomplished. And, it's not every kid's going to have the ideal family or parents that are involved or parents that are running them here or there. A lot of kids will never have that opportunity. But if that education surrounds them with the very best it's got in every way, shape, and form, you make a difference.
Mhm.
You might not see it right then. You make a difference.
Mhm. Now let's go. When you went to Hilton, you said at age 15, was
Yep,
it?
I was a sophomore, the middle of my sophomore
And
year.
that's where you met your one and only.
Yes,
Talk
yes,
a little
and I
bit
was the new girl in town. So
talk
I
to me a
gotta
little
tell
about
you,
what that was like being the new
it
girl,
was weird.
getting enculturated, making your mark, influential people. And sometimes your influential people may have been people that you combated with or whatever. Talk a little bit about that.
So it's funny because, again, a lot comes down to teachers. And interestingly, and this is not damning anyone by any means. But girls in high school and junior high can be jerks.
Mhm.
That's just how it is. And there was a lot of those funny, weird little petty jealousies and snide remarks because I started dating Dave, I think within 6 weeks of being there.
Mhm.
So it was not long. But most of the people there were absolutely wonderful. And I tended to affiliate more with the girls in the class behind me because one of my neighbors, Michelle Pecoraro, was from the class of 73. And I found that we just all had a lot in common. We were just kind of normal weird. rather than, I wasn't part of the in crowd. I would never be part of the in crowd. It just wouldn't, I wouldn't fit. That was okay. And there weren't sports back then. I celebrate these girls and what they can do today.
Mm-hmm.
This is huge. When I see what Mallory can do, when I was at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony 2 nights ago, and it was wonderful. And I stood up and got to clap for Marge Wyant because she was my teacher. She was instrumental in getting girls teams going and working with people and encouraging. Those voices for women need to be heard. Those voices for women changed the history right then and there. And I was part of that. I was part of seeing that, part of living it. So when people don't take that seriously now, I just want to smack them because no, we worked for those rights. People passed legislation to give us those rights. Don't mess with them. Just don't do it. It's not cool. So the teachers I had were wonderful. I got to be part of the newspaper that we were publishing back then, which obviously being a writer now was, and Mrs. I'm going to mess this up. I believe it was Mrs. Bailey, who was my junior English teacher, who said, "You have an incredible talent." And she echoed what my freshman English teacher had said, "Ruth, you've got something special. This is going to take you someplace someday." Those words, because I couldn't write for 40 more years. There was no time. There were kids. There were jobs. Those words kept me with that in my head that someday you're going to be a published writer. And so going into the public school was different. There were boys. Obviously, I snagged one right off. There were boys. Wasn't going to let that one get away. And there were different activities. So that was a cultural experience, riding a school bus. I walked to Nazareth. So it was different. Then I got a job at the Super Duper. So the Super Duper, for all you guys that don't remember, that aren't ancient, is where Tops is now. So the Super Duper was there. The Big M was up what's over there now?
Isn't it the credit unions there?
The credit union and a life
fellowship,
there. A church, yes. So that was, before it was Ben Franklin, was the Big M. So Dave worked at the Big M. I worked at the Super Duper. It was kind of a competition.
Of course.
And so we went through all those, and just having a job, having my own money, being able to do things. You grow up.
Sure do.
You grow up.
Now, you kind of touched on it a little bit. Culturally, what was society like in the late 60s, early 70s? That was the Vietnam era, wasn't it?
It was. And I have to say that I don't know if I was born more conservative. I don't know if that was because of my upbringing. And despite what everybody might think about Richard Nixon, I, as a 12-year-old, took a bus downtown because I wanted to see the Republican rally. It was the one held here. I don't know if there was a Democratic rally. I just remember, I believe it was Sister Campion, who was our history teacher, talking about that the presidential candidate was coming to town, was going to be downtown. I think it was at the War Memorial or, Blue Cross Arena now. And I thought, no, I want to go to this. I want to see what this is all about. So I did. Hop on a bus, go downtown. There weren't worries then. I could go downtown. I could shop. I could cruise around, do anything, get back on a bus and come home.
At 12 years old.
Probably at 10, because we had to go, we were poor. We had to go to the dental dispensary that's across from the Auditorium Theater back then. So that was the Eastman Dental Dispensary, which is now part of Strong and URMC. But we had to go there for all of our dental work. So yeah, when I was 7 and 8, my sister Jenny would take me. But by the time I was 10 or 11, I would get on the bus, go all the way downtown, which was about 25-minute ride, and then take an extra bus, a shuttle bus, down Main Street, and then do the same thing in reverse. But again, I don't know, maybe they were naive. Maybe it was because my parents weren't all that swift. But it worked out. And I got dental work done for a quarter. It's good. So yeah, it was the Vietnam era. And I was surrounded by, let me just say, more than the Vietnam era, I was living in the 10th Ward, just this side of the Genesee River, when the riots were breaking out across the Genesee River. And my sister, Mary Ellen Sweetgrass, went over there constantly. I don't know if she lived there at that time. I honestly can't remember that. But she was over there working for civil rights all that time. And there was violence. There were terrible things happening. It was the civil rights era where riots were becoming way too commonplace. But change needed to happen. And I understood that change needed to happen, that you had to be able to be whatever person or color or creed you were and walk down the street unaccosted like I was able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one side of that existence. The other side was Vietnam was going on, and people in colleges all over were pitching their own demonstrations against that. And there was, the make love, not war, and peace, dope, love kind of thing. I stayed away from all of that. First, I have an incredible respect for the fact that I got one body. One.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to me to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some folks will say, well, that's like a Catholic teaching, your body is a temple. I think it's common sense as well for a normal person to say, no, I've got to take care of my body. So I wasn't a drinker. I did smoke for a while,
Okay.
but no drugs. That whole scene just scared me. So I shied away from that. But the culture then was mixed because you had all of that going on. And then you had a lot of people still going to church, doing family functions. Stores weren't open on Sunday then. You still had the Sunday blue laws in effect. So you would have convenience stores open, but you would not have big stores open. The malls weren't open on Sundays. The malls were just being built.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, at my age, you've seen a lot. You've seen things come, and now we're kind of seeing things go, and you kind of rock with it.
I appreciate those comments on culture and the decades and how they changed throughout history. So we go through high school, and then it comes time to go to college. Did you know at that time I want to go to college for writing? How did you end up picking Nazareth, and how was that experience?
Okay, so Nazareth, I
that
was the high school.
okay?
I did not go to college.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
I went right to work outside of school.
Well,
First, I was a directory assistance operator. 411, may I help you?
Mm-hmm.
What number are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was funny. I was there for 6 months until I got into Kodak, and then I was there for a couple of years and then started having kids. In between there, Dave and I got married. So that was nice. We actually, because we saved, oh my gosh, we were so frugal. We didn't go out much, but we saved, and we were able to buy our first house down on Clearview Drive off of Lighthouse Road when we were 19 years old.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you, it was 10% interest right then, I believe. And we had to put a third down and pay closing costs. You couldn't take out loans for anything. But we had saved enough, and values were much less then. So that was a smart thing to do. But so not going to college was one of those, I look back and I think, you know what? Things would have changed a lot had I done that, because I'd gotten a nursing scholarship, a Regent scholarship for nursing that I could have used at a nursing school. And that was my intent. But then I decided to go to work instead. So there's pluses and minuses there. I was able to have 6 beautiful children, and I wouldn't have had Sarah or Matt or Seth had I gone to college at that point. But, and I say this very seriously because I did not have any amazing skills then, and there wasn't time to write when you're raising babies. That left me with a whole lot of hairnet and name tag jobs over the years, multiple ones. And that's okay, because in the end, I use all of those in my books, whether it was waitressing, working at a grocery store, being an aide in an emotionally disturbed classroom for BOCES for 9 years, wedding dress sales. I worked for Bridal Hall, which is a wonderful store.
That's where she first met, my wife met you.
Yes.
Hmm?
Yeah. So working there taught me a whole lot about the bridal industry. So I've taken all those things, used them in my work, and got paid for it. I figured that's pretty good.
But don't you think that raising children is like the best thing that you can do, you raising them rather than nowadays,
yes.
unfortunately, with women having careers and, they have got to drop them off at daycare to go to their job, pick the kids up,
So two things, because for 20 years I did daycare at home,
Okay.
which is where I met my, so many beloved families, the Tidings families, the Vericchios who used to be here, the Deans, I'm going to forget a name, so I'm going to apologize, because I was blessed to be able to help raise a whole bunch of wonderful kids. The Kenyan kids, and I'm going to stop naming names though, because I will forget. And that I think was almost like a vocation to help them raise their kids in the very best way while those moms worked, because being at home isn't for every woman. And I respect that and understand it. I loved it, but a lot of moms really like that 6, 7, 8 hours away and know that their kids are well cared for. And it's a balancing act, Mike. I think it can be that way for dads too. In that you're paying a bunch of money for somebody else to do what you could do for free at home. But on the other hand, how often have we seen either people pass away, marriages fail, crises loom, and these days, if a woman doesn't have something to fall back on, I see that as a problem. And this isn't because I'm pushing college for every woman. It's because you've got to be able to take care of yourself if something doesn't work out. And it's not because I'm embracing divorce or separation. It's because we have to be able to be strong. And I think that's huge. So back to daycare, though, I think it's also important to find a place that works for you.
Exactly.
Some place that reflects either your values or your lifestyle. I remember Lisa Tidings telling me one time, Ruthie, the reason my kids are here is because you let them do all the things I would never be able to let them do, because it would scare me to see them go up those trees and, swing down from ropes and do all this stuff. And you don't mind if they create these huge forts in your house and do that. And I get anxious if the house gets messed up. She was smart enough to see that, to look for balance. And we loved each other enough to trust each other to do what needed to be done. And that was cool. That was cool.
Yeah, I think your point about refining a place that reflects your values to put your children, your most prized possessions.
Yes.
And your point is very well taken about you need to be able to support yourself. God
Mike,
forbid
you make good
anything
coffee.
else. Oh, thank you. Thank Folgers. And I wasn't aware that you had raised, that you were a daycare. I don't even know if that's the proper name for it. But
and it doesn't matter what we call it. But when I left BOCES, I could see how difficult the school situations were getting. And this was in 2000. And I was injured on the job. And I knew that it was a result of the fact that safety concerns that we had put into place were not being utilized. Yes. Yeah. And I ended up with a dislocated shoulder, a torn trapezius. And it was a mess. And I thought, you know what? Just open your own place. Open your own place. And that way parents and I could interview each other, see what worked, see if it matched. And if it was a good match, some of my families I had with me for 10, 12, 15 years.
Do you still do that?
No, I stopped. So we had several little ones born in 2010. So all of a sudden I had several expectant mothers. I hope the county is not listening to this, but I'm past the I'm sure the time limit is up on this. But anyway, so I was like, okay, did you guys not think to call each other? What are you doing here? But we ended up with 3 babies in 2010. And then I had 2 grandchildren in 2010. So Beth would come over with her baby and help with the other babies. And it was that way for a year. So we had 5 littles and there was always somebody else there with me. But once those kids got to where they didn't need after school care anymore, so around age 11 or 12, that's when I stopped. By then I was writing multiple books a year and published, and so it wasn't a money thing by the time they were into school, because I was published and doing my own thing. But it was because I loved them all and they loved me, and it was a safe place for them to come after school and do their stuff, get their homework done.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Just talking to you. You could go in any order, but did the farm come first or did the writing come first?
So I think, and anybody out there, young person or old person listening to this will know, I think I was born a writer. This talent came directly from my mother.
Are writers born or are they made?
I think it can be either, but in my case, I was born.
Okay.
My mother had an amazing talent. Her illnesses and mental health struggles never allowed her to put that into use. And I think having a bunch of children at an age where, birth control wasn't talked about, and especially in the Catholic Church. And so I think she lost those opportunities due to the timing and the circumstances. But she was amazing, brilliant and amazing. I did not get the brilliance, but I did get the writing talent, and I'm okay with that. But I remember as a small child just making up stories in my head before I could write, and just making them up and figuring out what would happen and what if and how this would go, and always being complimented for my writing. I was an avid reader. Oh, God bless those librarians on Dewey Avenue at the Maplewood Library. Mike, they would let me come in and take a slew of books. I think because initially you could only take 2. And then I would have to walk all the way back home, read those, bring them back. I think they were cutting me slack before it became okay to take, 6 or 7 or 8. And I would take my stack of books home and I would tuck myself upstairs and I would just read and imagine myself writing stories like that. So I think that was always there, but you have to be able to concentrate. Who can concentrate when there's 6 kids around, when there's teams coming over, when there's jobs? So that had to be put on hold. But I always believed, I thought, when God wants me to do this, the time will open up. It will blossom. So we tried farming when we first moved to Parma Center Road and did it for, several years with the kids. And they probably hated us for it. I think that's what honestly sent them all to get an education, off to college and further degrees, because they're like, we are never coming back to this farm. So the joke's on some of them because they actually do. But having said that, once the kids were off on their own in college and getting married, there wasn't enough help, enough time. And we were both working 2 jobs. So we're like, okay, we rented the land out to multiple farmers over the years. So the new farm, the pumpkin farm, came about 9 years ago as one of those weird moments when Dave's like, I think I'd like to start farming again because I'm going to be retiring soon. And I was like, what? Are you serious? And he's like, oh, yeah, I think it would be fun. And I'm thinking, all that equipment, all that stuff, what do we get? But, so by that time, though, I was being published. So there was money coming in from that avenue. That was a wonderful thing, right? To be making money doing something I loved. And so the writing came before this issue of the farm. And the writing has its own little story, which started back when I started my daycare. I started waking up at 3:30 every morning. 3:30 every morning. Who does that? Who wakes up at 3:30 every morning? And I was like, okay, well, this is weird. What am I doing? What can I do? It's quiet. Zach and Luke were still at home back then. And then I thought, you dope. God's giving you this opportunity. You've got like 2.5 hours. Go write something. So back then had a typewriter, but my daughter was finishing college and I got her word processor. We couldn't afford computers. If you remember back then, computers were insanely expensive. So I had a word processor, didn't have internet. So I started my first story on that. It was a horrible story. It was terrible. It will never see the light of day, as the same with like 4 or 5 after that. However, that next, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose the years here. But a year or 2 later, after a customer at Basil's restaurant where I was waitressing also brought me in a word processor saying, I know you always wanted to be a writer. I'm bringing this to you because my daughter's done with it. I want you to be able to live your dream. So this wonderful customer at Basil's brought me this word processor. I at Sarah's at home, and I was like, okay, this is wonderful. Then Adam Ickes on the, I think he was on the cross country team at that time with Zach. But anyway, so he's one of the Ickes cousins. Dave's mother was an Ickes, so we're all related. Half of Hilton is interrelated. I'm just going to throw that in there. And when it comes to farm families, probably more so. But Danny Ann Ickes sent over a little laptop with Adam. And he said, I told my mom you wanted to be a writer. So here's our we are getting a new computer. Here's our old one. What? Mm-hmm. This is like amazing. It was a computer. Mm-hmm. It worked. I called and got another phone line, and I got AOL. I had internet. It was so funny. So funny. I mean, I look back on it now, and that was huge. That was huge. So I put it up in the attic. I would work up in the attic when I didn't have kids there early in the morning. There was no heat in the attic, by the way. So, but it was a start. And then I started saving money to get my own computer, to upgrade. And of course it was a big desktop, that went into a little bedroom. But that's how that all began. I look at those as Holy Spirit moments because I didn't open those doors. God absolutely, positively opened those doors for me. And it was, 8.5 years before I got the call that I would be published by a, royalty paying publisher, by Harlequin, by Love Inspired. But I never quit. Every day. Every day. I am up early. I am down there. I am writing or editing. And I'm still writing books. So I am living that dream. Now, though, back to the farm, because here's Dave. No, I'm going to retire in a couple of years. So and I'm like, okay, all right. So the first 2 years were horrible. I'm just going to say that out loud. Horrible. But we were doing vegetables. We were trying all the things and stuff didn't work the same way as it had 20 years ago. And we were like, okay, we got to learn some new tricks here, some new things. And then my daughter, Sarah, we were down there visiting for a Halloween party they throw, helping them with it. And she said, guys, what are you doing? Concentrate on fall. She said, do you know what it costs me to take my kids to a fall farm down here? $15 a head. And that doesn't buy me anything. That gets me in the door. She said, do fall. You've got the gorgeous house, all the trees. It's beautiful in the fall. And Dave and I, the whole way home, it's an 11-hour drive. We're talking and we said, yeah, let's try it. Let's try it. In the meantime, 2 weeks before that, one of our customers, Ellie Costello, Ellie, if I messed up your last name, I apologize, had said to me, Ruthie, can you grow blue pumpkins? And I was like, Ellie, I have no idea what you're talking about. What's a blue pumpkin? And she said, no, at all the fancy garden stores, they have these blue pumpkins and they charge so much for them. And I was like, okay, if it's a pumpkin, I can probably grow it. Let me do some research. So that year I started researching, and the next year we had orange pumpkins, tangerine pumpkins, white pumpkins, and blue pumpkins, and all different kinds of gourds. People went crazy. It was amazing. I mean, I was like, okay, we struck a nerve. And we don't advertise. So it was just word of mouth, social media, Facebook, then Instagram. And it was so funny because as I kept growing or finding more different kinds of seeds, people just kept spreading the word. And so the farm has grown into this amazing thing in 9 years. For 2 years that were absolute fails. So in 7 years, it has gone from being quaint to us buying the lot next door. So we would have a parking lot, expanding the display space, bringing in sheds, and starting mums. Okay, so this was a whole new thing. So 5 years ago, I said, well, mums will go great with pumpkins. I'm going to order 800 mums. And Dave's like, oh, dear God. And I was like, no. You know what? Robin Sweeney will give me advice because Robin grew beautiful mums. So call Robin. And I'm like, Robin, I'm going to do this. She's like, Ruthie, they need to be fed all the time. And that meant us because we don't have fancy watering system. That meant we fed them every day, pot by pot, all 800. Then it went to, so we did 800 for 2 years, and they were gone so quickly. And so then I went to 1600, gone the third week of September. I was like, okay. Then we went to 2500, and now we are at ordering over 4,000 mums, doing 400 triples, doing 200 hanging baskets this coming year because we experimented with them last year and people bought them like crazy. But I'm going to tell you why I think this has been so successful. First, because we keep our prices very affordable. There's no pumpkin over $5. And we went into it with that mindset. No one was going to pay more than $5 for a pumpkin when so much of the world is charging by the pound. Second, that we wanted it, Dave was insistent. He said, there will be no admission fees ever. He said, whatever we do, however this grows or does, nobody's going to have to pay to come visit our farm, because I want families like our family, 6 kids. Nothing was affordable when you've got 6 kids. I want them to feel comfortable coming. And that has, I think, lent itself to families coming repeatedly. They don't just come once, they come 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. They come early in the season, they come mid-season, they come to get their Halloween pumpkins. And, we have a wonderful partnership now with Deconic Farms, with Brian down the road, because we don't have enough acreage to grow all the pumpkins we sell. So he helps us out with all those big, beautiful orange pumpkins. And that's a blessing right there. I remember the year I called him 3 years ago. And I was like, Brian, I'm almost out of pumpkins. Do you have anybody that's got excess? And he's like, well, how many do you need, Ruthie? And I said, 5,000. And he said, today? He's like, no, but over the next couple of weeks. And he said, I've got you covered. And I don't know that it was fully 5,000, but I knew that we didn't have any to get into October. So when God opens the door and you go into it with faith, there's going to be hard times. And I'm not saying, we're a normal family. There's times when I'm like, no, you can't do this. Or Dave's like, oh my gosh, you're all driving me crazy. Or the girls will be like, no, this is not going to work out there. Sometimes you just have to believe and go on. And our volunteers, and some of them, family and friends come and they don't look for payment. They're what help keep prices down on the weekends, because they're the older people there. I shouldn't say older, because Mandy and Paul are not older. Well, Paul's older. Sorry, Paul. It's true. But those people in their 40s and 50s aren't getting paid for their time there on the weekends. They're coming to volunteer so that we can get through those 8 weeks without having to raise prices. And that's a blessing, that we have so much commitment from friends, family, and sometimes neighbors. When Dave's mom passed away a couple of years ago and it was so busy, the neighbors came over and helped harvest, just because they knew we were in a bind because it was September. And what kind of a blessing is that? Mm-hmm. My neighbor, Brian, when I need stuff done that I can't fix, I call him, and Brian Stewart, and he comes over and he's like, oh yeah, Ruthie, I've got this. Tell Dave not to worry about it. So when you build a community around you and you're all there for each other, that's a big plus. And I talked way too much. I told you I have a lot of words.
No, you don't, because I like to learn. I feel more educated and inspired and motivated when I speak to people like you. And it's
my children might argue that. They would argue that.
And sometimes you meet somebody and you talk to them and you're like, I wish I had that 5 minutes back in my life, because I don't know what I just heard.
We've all had those.
But to circle back a little bit, and I don't like that phrase, but let's go back to your kids a little bit. Talk to me about your children, raising kids, and where they've ended up in the world.
So we are blessed that no one's in jail. So that's a good thing. No, I'm kidding. No, so they're all wonderful and they're all smart, and they I don't want to be that bragging mother, because they're all amazing in their different ways. Sarah is our oldest. She was the valedictorian here at Hilton, then went on, and she would be like, Mom, why did you say that? Because it was important for this kid from a farm to go on to the U of R and then on to Princeton, got her master's and her doctorate, and she is now a professor at Duke University. Matt is a director at Paychex. He and Zach both went to the University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League, because they were both smart, but they were both wonderful runners, distance runners. And again, that opportunity, you can open your own doors if you're willing to put in the work. And these guys were. Seth is got his education between St. Lawrence and Roberts. And then he did his master's online. And I'm not sure which university it was, but then decided not to be a teacher. And he's now working full time at Wegmans. And then Zach and Luke. Zach got his law degree at American University in Washington. And Luke went on from being at the U of R to Northeastern University in Boston, and has ended up as an accountant and an auditor and is now working for the Vaughn firm down in Dallas, Texas. So they are all, God love them. They are all smart. They are all blessed with that wonderful experience of being able to learn quickly and avidly. So that's a wonderful thing. And Beth's going to.
Did you forget a kid?
I did. She's going to say, you did that at the Big M one day too. Do you remember that, Mom? When you left me at the Big M, or how about the time?
Wait, left her?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We were all pulling away. It was a very Home Alone moment. Home Alone wasn't out yet, so it was not one bit funny. So, because Beth actually works with me. She works at the farm. She helps run the farm, and she got her degree at the University of Rochester, and but she helps run the farm. She does all of my graphics for my books, and she edits all of my indie books. So she is responsible for the polish that goes on all of that. So Beth, I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that to you. And when it comes to the farm things, she and Amanda are a big help to all of us. Amanda, my niece and goddaughter, who I kind of stole from her sweet mother. But, we share. We share, Amanda. Those things are huge, because your education does not always take you in the direction that you think it's going to. And for Beth, it didn't. She got her education there, but went on to be a youth minister and met her husband doing youth ministry across the country as a missionary, and brought him back. So we wanted to bring in some, different genetics into the gene pool here. And so they're all doing well. We are blessed by all of them. And I don't like to brag about the educational aspects, because it sounds like bragging. But on the other hand, they earned it all on their own. I don't take credit for it, because they did all the hard work to make that happen. We did the encouragement, but it wasn't like we could fund those educations. That was
going to be my next question.
Yeah, that
did
wasn't
they
a
do
reality.
that scholarships
And loans, and almost all of them have paid all their loans back at this point. So no, they're.
How old are they?
Oh gosh, that's going to give you an idea into how old I am, but that's okay.
Well, I know how old you are.
Yes.
And it's an even number, right?
It is not. I'm 69, so you were close.
I was going to round
69.
up.
Yeah, no, yeah. You're supposed to say, but Ruthie, you don't look a day over 47.
You don't. You sent me those pictures, and I did tell you. You showed me a picture from 10 years ago, and now, you can't.
Okay, so that shows that you're a guy, because I tell you, I can look at those two pictures, and I'm like, lines, wrinkles. Yeah.
I was looking at the smiles the same, the perkiness.
See, you're sweet.
Okay. Your age is your kids, though. You got to tell me.
Yes. Okay. So, don't put me on this.
No, okay, but let's go.
Sarah's 48, and then it travels down from there. So they go down to 37. So I had them in 11 years, 6 kids. And it was crazy, fun, busy. There were times we had a station wagon. I thought that was like such a cool thing when I could finally afford a station wagon.
Loved them.
Yes, I love that.
No
car.
strapping seats, no car seats. Kids just rolled all over the place.
I did do car seats because I was,
right.
remember I said it?
Healthcare,
I was like,
home care.
I was, I didn't do drugs. I didn't do drinking. Because I was always that bit of caution, but not crazy. I'm not anxious, but I was cautious. So they did have car seats. But anyway, they, the station wagon, we lived in it because they were all playing multiple sports, doing multiple things. Sarah headed up the UN club. She played varsity tennis. Matt was running. Matt was playing football or basketball and doing indoor track. And I mean, you were running constantly. Everyone was doing 1 or 2 or 3 sports, depending on whether they were in school sports or out of school sports, and sometimes at the same time. And they still did well in school. So my theory back then was two A's, academics and athletics. Don't worry about boys and girls at that stage. Academics and athletics. Keep your grades up.
Did you hear that, Mallory?
Yeah, Mal. And immerse yourself in your athletics. Do the best you can. Kind of took the same attitude into all my hairnet name tag jobs. Do your best, no matter how menial the job is. Do your best. Shine. Make people feel like they're important to you, whether you're waiting on their table or, taking their measurements for a wedding gown and trying to explain to them that
it doesn't
gown
fit.
Manufacturers size differently, and that your normal size 12 is going to be a size 16 in this manufacturer, and then wiping their tears. But all those things, give it your best. Give it your best.
Did you come up with the term hairnet name tag jobs, or did you?
No, stole it from
Love it.
Ace Ventura.
Yes.
Yes. I'm pretty sure it was from one of his movies that the boys loved, and he talked about that, and it's like, that's me. Yeah.
So you're also a grandmother, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How many grandkids?
We have 14 grandkids.
14?
14. Yep.
Oh, so I'm trying to think of the. Okay, go ahead.
So the oldest, Katie, who has never lived in the Rochester area because Sarah was in Princeton when she was born, is now a sophomore at the University of Rochester. And we are thrilled that that's what she picked. And she is doing, wonderfully well there. And she picked it because she wanted a really solid college experience. Beautiful, bright girl. But she wanted to be, she was okay being away from mom and dad, but she wanted some kind of family nearby. So it's kind of cool because then we can pick her up and take her to track meets or games. And when she needs Starbucks or something, Grammy can hop in the car and make sure that happens, because it isn't always easy without a car to get around to those places when you're at a university. So no, it's lovely to have her here. That's like a thrill for all of us.
Some of the colleges and universities like Princeton, one's a professor at Duke, U of R, UPenn. I mean, that's Ivy League, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing, all in one family. Like,
well, thank you. I think they're pretty amazing.
Coming from a family that owns a farm.
Well,
and I don't mean that as a shot at you, but like, that's incredible. And I think when we started the podcast, and I don't think I needed you to tell me, you said I'm an intelligent person. I think your husband's probably a smart guy too.
Oh yeah.
And then it's transferred down to your kids, and that high expectation leads to high results too.
Yeah, I agree. And again, that comes right back to that Catholic education and looking around and seeing what worked for people, and high expectations and encouragement and love. Those all go hand in hand. I mean, you can't have high expectations and be a jerk, because that's not going to help anything. Right? I mean, that's
some of my students have said that about me.
Oh, well, Mike, I can believe that. Oh, and before we go any farther, I do have to get this in because I've been thinking of this all week, Mike, just because your name is Mike, because one of my favorite commercials is, what day is it? What day is it?
Mike. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I had to do that.
Yeah.
Zach said, please don't do that. Mom, don't. I was like, Zach, I have to. It's Mike.
Well, and then I hear these. I'm watching Mallory's games, and I hear these, Mallory.
Oh,
that must be you too.
That
right?
is me. I have a big.
Okay.
My children used to say that you could hear me on a cross country course. This was not necessarily them complimenting me. I want you to know that you could hear me on a cross country course across the park. And I said, well, that's because I pick my times to cheer for them, because I know when they're off in the woods and they're thinking this is too long, too hard, that if they hear somebody cheering for them because they're away from all the people, that will be their impetus. There's like, Mom, that never once happened. That they're lying. Of course it did.
Well, getting to cross country a little bit. I mean, there's sports that they all require dedication and talent. When you're running that long distance, like, describe to me a little bit about maybe your kids' triumphs over that, and like just mind over matter at sometimes when they're doing that sport.
Because I'm not the runner. Dave is the runner. Dave was the runner. That's where that talent comes strictly from Farmer Dave, because he loved running. He used to run when we were young and had kids, and the kids were young, and he would do marathons and he would run road races. So I can't take any credit for that. But I can take credit for, driving the car, getting them going, and being there and cheering. And so that is a dedication. It is. When we first started with track, so Matt was always this gifted runner, always. And when he was a sophomore in school, I think it was Carl Demo, who I loved as a teacher, and God rest his soul. He was a good man.
Great teacher.
Carl said to him, Matt, I apologize if I get this wrong, something about Matt, you're not working up to potential. He said, you're so smart. Could you, work a little harder in my class? And Carl did this wonderful honors English. And Matt was like, he said, what are you going to do? How are you going to get into college? And Matt said to him, don't worry about that, Skippy. I'm going to be going on a running scholarship. And Carl was like, but Matt, you don't run. So that was Matt's sophomore year. And then the spring of his sophomore year, he started running for track and for Jeff Merkel. And it blossomed from there, that his talent and perseverance, Matt perseveres at everything, just kind of took off. And he set the example for his siblings. Sarah likes to say that, she said, yep, I got into the Ivies because of my brains. My brothers ran fast. And it's a joke between them. But Matt's perseverance paid off. The younger kids saw that. They saw Sarah's hard work pay off. That mattered. Similar to, me looking around and seeing, how did people raise successful kids? What did they do? How did they do it? Faith, hope, love, perseverance, and don't quit. And they adopted those same principles. I mean, I look at their dad, at Dave, and he is such a hardworking, industrious person. He will work himself to the bone at times. Sometimes we have to, scale him back and say, okay, we're good for now. We're good. But he has set the example that, faith and family first, and do what you got to do to get it done. So I think together we gave them those expectations, but also the encouragement, which was a big part of it. And I hope along my way with 20 years of daycare that I gave those kids the encouragement too, because that meant the world to us, to help inspire other kids, to teach them all kinds of things. I remember Taylor Tidings saying at some point, she told me, so I was in English class, I don't know, sophomore, junior year, and they were talking about their childhood. And I said, no, my childhood was, I was climbing trees and swinging from ropes and putting on shows. We had an old wagon and the kids would put on shows. They'd bring music out. They would create their own dances. They would put on a show, on a play and whatever. And people were like, what? She said, they just looked at me like I was like from outer space, because nobody does that. And she said, no, that's how I was raised. That's what we did. And they were like, okay. But I think that's a cool way to raise a bunch of kids, let them explore, let them have fun, let them try things. And nobody ever fell out of a tree and died.
Right.
So that was good.
Exactly.
That was good.
Exactly. Before we finish up, what do you think's missing in today's culture? We talked a little bit before the podcast, and I just feel, speaking to you, everything is so grounded, and there were hardships along the way, from a tough raising with parents of alcoholism and bipolar and, lack of money and everything, but you've made it, and it hasn't been easy.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. How do you see today's culture? And if you would, if you had that bully pulpit, what would you say?
Oh my goodness. Oh.
And I don't mean that you have to be preachy or a lecturer, but honesty matters.
I think it's really important as we look at what social media and what AI is able to do to our perceptions and conceptions today. I think we would all be a whole lot smarter to not draw assumptions, to not form opinions without double and triple checking everything. Like actually people used to do when they were journalists back in my day. You were never allowed to write something or publish something unless it was double and triple checked. I mean, you go watch those old Superman shows and Jimmy Olsen, they had to double check. I'm saying that lightly, but it's true. today, the minute somebody thinks something, it's out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be based in fact. It doesn't have to necessarily be based in science. I think we all saw that through COVID, that word goes out and people grab onto it. I don't think we as a society can afford to do that. I think we have to be smarter, more questioning. I think we have to delve. I think we also have to go back to that idea of sacrificial love. To me, the idea of sacrificial love, first, came to me as a Christian, as a Catholic, as a person, through Jesus. Sorry, Mike. I got him all
Went down the
choking on
wrong-
his water.
Oh, go ahead.
So sacrificial love was not an unusual thing 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Somewhere along the line of the 60s into the 70s, it seemed to me to start to erode. And you don't see the same kind of thing. You don't see as many parents sacrificing their own happiness for their child's happiness. You don't see as many people in education sacrificing their time for the child's time. I'm going to tell you one little thing is my kids all went to St. Lawrence School. And honestly, it was the parents that were there, part of St. Lawrence at that time, back in the 80s and 90s, will tell you it was Camelot. It was Camelot. We had an amazing principal, amazing staff, great pastor. The whole thing worked together. And that was like surround sound for raising children. So I was very blessed to have these kids in that environment at that time. And I worked an extra job to be able to help pay that tuition, but it was so worth it because then when they came to Hilton, they were ready academically, socially. They were ready to expand their horizons and do well. But that idea of sacrificial love, when teachers would stay after school to help a kid that was struggling, when teachers would stay after or staff would stay after to work on a project or to help if there was a fundraiser kind of thing, all those things, and they were being done without pay. Fast forward to, I went down to the high school, probably like 8-9 years ago. And I was invited down to work with classes to talk about creative writing, something I love to do. I love working with kids. I love talking writing. We did some great writing exercises. It was wonderful. And when we were all done, I said, you know what? I would be more than willing to come down here and volunteer to do this on a regular basis. That would be wonderful. I'd be glad to do it. And the teacher said to me at that time, she said, I can't stay to be with you to do that. And you can't do it here on your own. The union won't allow me to give that time away. I'll get in trouble. And I was like, okay, because I don't know a lot about the teachers union as far as how it works on the day-to-day basis. I do know that most of the teachers that affected my life were often doing weird things at odd hours just to inspire kids. And this is not a dig at teachers, but if people are afraid to do extra because they're going to get in trouble, that's kind of a red flag for me because that interrupts that sacrificial love right there. Now, that may have been just that individual teacher, but I have heard from other teachers since then that her concerns were valid. So there's that. But I don't want to pick on teachers because I love teachers and I love so many people work with kids and do such a good job. But if I could change things now, it would be to help instill people re-grasping faith, re-grasping that idea of sacrificial love and giving to others without expectations of things in return, of trying their best no matter what they do. Because I'm afraid that when you go to those name tag and hairnet jobs, there's a lot of folks that aren't trying their best. And I think that's a stepping stone to doing your best later on. And you being kind, reaching out to others, not being judgmental. So that's what I would be advised at this point.
Well, as we close up the podcast, it's been wonderful. I first became aware of you and I might lose it, during Lisa Tiding's struggle.
Yes.
And my wife had a celebration of her life fundraiser.
Yes.
And
Don't stop believing.
exactly. And the self-sacrifice that was around that night and took all the power and the hours into it. And the way I viewed Lisa was a very self-sacrifice, love type of person.
Agreed.
Talk a little bit about Lisa and what she meant to you and her kids. And
all right, I'm going to try not to get emotional here because so Lisa wasn't perfect, but we
none of us are. Again, we've already said that. There's only been one.
She was an amazing friend, an amazing mother, an amazing person. She was one of those. Maybe this is why we got along so well, because she was an Energizer bunny.
Oh my
she
God,
helped
yeah.
at church. She helped with productions because Taylor was in productions. She was running around, getting McKenna to the various sports that McKenna was into. She was always helping at school, doing things at school, taking on extra at school, working with kids at school with difficulties. And Lisa was never afraid to challenge them and say, oh, no, I think you can do better.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try this again. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, when she and Jeff first came and interviewed with me for a spot at daycare, the daycare was new. I was fairly new, but I'd raised a bunch of kids. We had all those college credits to throw out at people and make it seem like we were smart. And we live in a 169-year-old house. Those of you who have been to the farm know that our house, it's a great old house and it's ancient. And so we get snakes in the basement on a semi-regular basis. Yes. And this time, so Taylor was born in May. They're interviewing with me in July. And Lisa was going back to school in September. And all of a sudden we hear Beth, who is down in the basement, boys, there's a snake. And Zach and Luke come running down the stairs, I think with golf clubs, baseballs, bats, I don't know. But I think it was golf clubs because Luke liked to golf. So they come running down the stairs and they run down to that basement. And I'm sitting here holding this brand new baby. She's like 6 weeks old. And this young parent, I'm thinking, okay, this is dead in the water. Absolutely dead in the water. And they go down and they're like, oh, we got him, Mom. We got him. And they come up with the snake on the golf club and they carry the snake outside. And I'm like, dear Lord.
And you still got the tidings. Kids.
Oh, my stars. It was funny because Lisa said later, she said, on the way home, Jeff and I talked and he said, you know what? I like that those brothers ran to their sister's aid. If she can help raise our kids to do things like that, I'm all in. And it did help that I was good friends with Jeff's aunt, Meg Henning, who said, oh no, if you get Ruthie, you are blessed. So grab her while you can. And they did. And that became my road with Lisa. And we became friends, from early on. She knew all of my funny antics and she was okay with me doing all kinds of weird things with children, letting them explore their surroundings. And she was fine with that. And that I encouraged them. But as we got to when Brody was born, and her cancer was diagnosed when Brody was 14 months old, that was a turning point. So here was my beautiful dear friend at 36 years old with cancer in her breast and 4 beautiful kids and a prognosis that could be all right or could be life-threatening. And at that point, I knew that God had put us together because we were going to walk this walk together. And we did. Lisa went through her treatments. I kept the kids. Her mom came and helped when she could, when Lisa was going through surgeries. But that year, Lisa and I spent, as she was going through chemo and radiation, so much time on our side porch, sitting there rocking babies. Because remember, there were those babies in 2010. Mm-hmm. Mackenzie wasn't with us anymore, but we still had, Beth would come over with Eli, and there were still 3 little 14, 15, 16, 17 toddlers. So, and we talked about everything. We talked about faith. We talked about love. We talked about these children. We talked about the future. And at one point, Lisa said to me, I know God put us together. She said, I know that all along. She said, I think you and I were actually in heaven. And he said, okay, Ruthie, this is going to be your life. You're going to have a horrible childhood and you're going to have to stand up and be strong. And Lisa, you're going to face cancer later on that's going to be threatening your life. And
So we took a brief moment for a break so Ruthie could have some coffee. We were finishing up our podcast talking about Lisa Tidings and the effect that she had on it. And I agree with 100%. She wasn't a perfect person, but to be around Lisa was to be around energy
yes,
and life. Yes. And at her ceremony or her fundraiser, I remember I had to leave early. And I said, Lisa, I'm sorry I had to leave early. And she said, I love you. And, you know, you say I love you to your family members and your children, but that friendship to friendship love, I'll never forget that. And when I was going through my trials and tribulations with cancer, she was my person. And she would come over and she gave me a chain for chemo to take off a chain each day for a treatment. And mine wasn't nearly as severe as hers. And we were basically going through stuff at the same time. And she was very, very, very inspirational through that. So we were talking about, I believe, and you can go back on the story a little bit, that God brought you two together in heaven through your struggles to help with her struggles and rocking babies on the porch.
Yeah.
So take it from there.
So we have this wonderful swing on the side porch that I told the kids once I had 3 books sold. I bought a swing for the side porch so we could sit and swing with the little ones. And that was at the same time that Lisa was going through her first round of treatments that first year when Brody was 14 months old. And so we had all these cute littles and we would go out there on the side porch, you know, whether she was going through her chemo or it was the radiation. And we would talk. And I remember one day someone had said to me, we all pick our lives, you know, God lets us pick our lives. And I was like, oh, right, you got to be kidding me. Because I would have been a princess. I'm just going to go right out there and say this. It would have been Princess Ruthie. And Lisa said, you know what? She said, you know, you're wrong. She said, you know, you wouldn't have. You would have picked exactly what you did because you would have known that it would have made a difference to others later on. She said, and I believe God put us together for that very reason. She said, I believe that he probably was like, all right, Ruthie, you're going to have this like wretched childhood, but you're going to grow up to be a pretty cool person and you're going to work with kids and you're going to have an influence. And he's like, Lisa, you're going to have this wonderful life and then you're going to get cancer and you're going to have to deal with. And she said, I think you and I looked at him and said, hell yeah. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that is probably more accurate considering our personalities. So Lisa and I, that first year of her first diagnosis, spent a lot of time together because she couldn't teach. She was immunocompromised because of the chemo and the radiation, and she was weak. She'd had the double mastectomy after the chemo. So it was a year of treatment, and people donated their time to her sick bank so that she could still get paid. And she was amazing, but it was hard. I won't paint a picture that makes her out to be, you know, heroic over the whole thing because it was hard, but she was also heroic because she got through it. And then we got our miracle of 8 years, you know, 7+ years, but we all had these beautiful little bracelets. And they were rubber bracelets that her aunt Maureen had made. And they said, Lisa Tidings or Team Tidings on them. And when we got to 7 years, I said, Lisa, I'm taking my bracelet off, but I am not throwing it away. It will be on my dresser so that when we get to the next round, we'll be ready. Because when they did her treatments, there was a very chilling line from the pathologist that said, when we went under examination of the breast material, we found multiple regions of cancer cells, most of which were dead. And we knew that it had already gone to her lymph nodes. The words most of which were dead after rounds of chemo And a double mastectomy was our cue that we were probably going to fight the battle again. And we did. Lisa called me in November of, 2018, right? 19. And she said, Ruthie, I've got to go have a test done. And Jeff's out of town. Would you take me? And I was like, of course. Of course. She said, they said I have a pleural effusion in my lung. And I was like, yes, I will be glad to take you. And that became the second round. And I have to say, I was blessed to be on hand for a whole lot of doctor's appointments, infusions, whatever it took to help her, because that was that second diagnosis. And at that time, we realized that this was not a good prognosis, that this was the beginning of the end. It wasn't something we shared with the children at that time. Jeff knew. He did not talk about it, but I know he knew. And he was busy working. He had changed jobs a couple of times, so he had work to do. And I was honored to be there to take Lisa to a lot of different things that she needed to be at. When you're managing cancer and end-stage cancer or second diagnosis metastatic cancer, it is like a full-time job. Just the number of people, of agencies that are involved, the number of medications, the number of treatments. And I was blessed to be able to do that with her. My daughter took over. I was actually doing preschool with Lena at the time. And Beth stepped in and took that back over so that I could be with Lisa.
And
I brought tissues down.
it's okay. And I think, God brings
God
people
put us together. Absolutely.
and I think you and Lisa are a perfect example.
Oh my gosh, I don't want you to think we sat around crying, because we did not. We laughed.
I knew Lisa, and I now know you more. So.
Oh, you know what? We met those challenges with as much humor and love as we possibly could with the kids. I mean, as they became more aware of what was going on, and then Lisa's got more ill, and it got to the point where medicine was, the chemos were too strong. So they backed off of that, and COVID actually gave her a nice respite, because they backed off of that. The kids were home. She had 3 months with those kids at home that she would not have had if they were all in school. So there was that beautiful blessing that COVID was so weird and so wretched in so many ways, but she had this respite. And there was this time when, because I would be over there helping, and I had promised her, you won't die alone. I said, when I think it's time for you to stop, I will tell you. She made me promise that. She said, tell me when it's time. And I said, I will. We got to the summer of 2020, or late May, and she had actually in April said, you know what, I'm afraid of people coming in the house. So if you guys bring stuff, just leave it outside the door. Germs were scary now, because she was very weak and COVID would kill her. We all felt the same way. So we all kind of stayed away, just left things at the door. She showed up at the farm in May, and she came walking back. I was working in the moms, and I was like, hey, Slim, you finally coming out of hiding? And she's like, I just had to see you. And I said, well, it's about time. And we went on that summer. Lisa had spent the summer before working at the farm helping, because she said, I'm not going to sit home and wait to die. And she had created beautiful things. And she is part of the reason we do crafts and things now, because Lisa started it and then she died. So what's up with that, Lisa? It was rather rude. I'm not going to, Mandy lets us know that all the time, that Lisa started this, and then she booked. So, so we still do. We do a wonderful scholarship now in Lisa's honor because for a high school senior, because that was one of her wishes. One of her wishes was, can you start a scholarship fund that will be in my name so the kids know what I thought about education? So we made sure that happened. That summer, as I watched her slipping away, was really hard. But at the same time, I would not change a moment of that time with her because we were blessed to have each other. We were blessed when there were times when she was kind of out of it. I would just go over and sit at her feet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, friendship,
Mm-hmm.
love.
Mm-hmm.
You're never ready to say that final goodbye,
Mm-hmm.
but they happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm blessed. You know, we've got 4 wonderful kids that I am so blessed to be part of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They mean the world to us,
Mm-hmm.
to me, to Dave, to the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my voice is shaky, but that's okay. Emotions are a good thing. So yeah, I think you can't be afraid of death, nor can you be afraid of life.
Mm-hmm.
You live life, and when your time comes, you reach out and embrace it. And I remember the day she told me, she called me and said, can you come over? And I was like, yeah, I'll be right
Mm-hmm.
there. And she said, the kids were all down in the Outer Banks with their grandparents for their normal summer vacation down there. And she said, I'm going into hospice. And I said, it's time, honey.
Mm-hmm.
It's time. The cancer had gotten to places where her body couldn't function.
Mm-hmm.
And she realized that. And I said, do you want me to tell you what it's going to be like? And she said, please.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And 12 days later, she was gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ruthie, I know we're going to end on an emotional note, but you know what?
It's a good note.
It is. And I MC banquets all the time, and I use this phrase in the beginning that Jim Valvano once said, that you've lived a good day if you've laughed, you thought, and you were moved to the onset of tears. And I can say that in this podcast alone. And I think this world needs strong women like yourself as examples, and that raise strong families that believe in faith and family. And I'm overjoyed that you were able to join us.
I was thrilled to be asked. And sorry about the tears, guys. But you know what? If you can't cry over the people you love, that's just silly. It's okay to have emotions, laugh, love, hug. And you know, when those moments come and you need to say goodbye, we say goodbye. And we do it with love because that's how it needs to be. Thank you, Michael.
You're very welcome. And on that note, this has been Mike Hayes with Ruthie, because I'm not going to butcher your name. Get one of her books. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll be back with more in the future. Good day.
The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore